Noobs, bro. Noobs. Or maybe just people that kind of forgot how things used to be back in the good old days. But you know what? With Budokai Tenkaichi 4 being announced, I've actually been more excited to talk about a topic than I have been in a while, especially when it comes to anime games, because anime games in general, not just the Dragon Ball games, have kind of gone downhill. It's just kind of like iffy. Sometimes it's just okay. When it came to the last Demon Slayer game, it was fun, it was nice, though I did take a bit of time to get used to that game, because when I first played that game I didn't really enjoy it as much, but then I got a pretty good sense of it and liked it. But then after a while you're like, okay, am I just gonna keep playing this game? And so when it comes to a lot of games, they're either okay, some of them are good, and a lot of them, most of them, are just kind of whack, if I do say so myself. And when the Dragon Ball games come out, there usually is a lot of hype just for it to kind of just immediately not be that hype, like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was. But when it comes to this game, bro, this Budokai Tenkaichi 3 is pretty much in consensus around the entire internet as the best Dragon Ball game ever created. And I kind of find that pretty amazing that everybody in the world has the same opinion except for the people that don't, but that's a pretty small minority. Now, people seem to forget when it comes to the roster, specifically about Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3, the last game in the series. Yes, the roster was gigantic, and now the debate is that should it be gigantic for 4 or should it not be gigantic for 4? And I'm saying it should be, and a lot of people for some reason are combating the people that have the opinion that I have by saying that that's ridiculous to ask for that. And I think they're saying that because they seem to just not know how things used to be.
Sensu beans, yeah, I need to regenerate. I'm about to go off like I'm the Avatar state, and I can say
the first big critique I see is that it shouldn't be a big roster, because the characters need to feel unique and they need to have their own movesets, their own dynamics, and they can't just fill up all these slots with a bunch of skins and just to make the roster look gigantic and pretty and be like, oh, look at all these characters. And what do I say to the people who make that argument? You know what? I agree with you. So if I agree with you, how can we have two different opinions? Well, I agree with you in the sense that pretty much all that stuff is right, except for the fact where I say it shouldn't be a big roster. I agree with having all those things and the big roster. You see, with Budokai Tenkaichi 3, we had a lot of characters. We had characters that you wouldn't even think of to be in a game. Like, I'm telling you, a lot. There were characters that I forget were in that game. Aurelie from Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump, she's not even originally a Dragon Ball character and she's in there. There's a character just called Frieza Soldier. Just called Frieza Soldier, and he's got his own moveset and all that stuff too. And it's just awesome. It's awesome. But you see, with these games, there's even a bunch of different Gokus in this game. There's like, and I'm talking about base Goku. I'm not talking about his transformations. I'm talking about base Goku. You got Goku from every saga. When it comes to the newer games, I would be worried when it came to a big roster like Xenoverse. Let's talk about Xenoverse 2. Xenoverse 2, especially now when it has just a bunch of DLC, even when like it's kind of past its prime, every time they announce a new DLC character for that game, I kind of get confused and I'm like, people, is there really enough people still playing that game to just keep adding DLC? But you see, my biggest critique with Xenoverse 2 is that it's content, and no quality. So instead of quality over quantity, it's basically quantity over quality. They just keep pumping content into that game, but there's nothing really good. It's a bunch of characters that basically share the same moveset. They make the same 10 special moves and just spread it throughout all these characters. So basically, it's like skins. It's like with the last Demon Slayer game, where you can actually pay for different versions of the characters, but they basically just have the same moveset and it's just a skin. But instead of it filling up a spot as in a new different costume for the character, it's filled up a slot as a different character just to make the roster look bigger. And of course I did buy Zenitsu because he's the best character in that game. But when it comes to the Dragon Ball Xenoverse games, that's what they did. They just filled up a bunch of slots with different characters that are basically reskins of other characters. And honestly, a lot of them didn't even make sense to be reskins. It just looked like they didn't try at all, and I mean at all, to make the characters unique. Like, it was ridiculous. People wonder, I could go on a giant rant about all the things I don't like about Xenoverse 2, but in my opinion, Xenoverse 2 is not a bad game. It's not a horrible game. It's just far, and I mean far, from the best. And anyone who says Xenoverse 2 is the best game, you gotta be a noob, right? Like, you didn't play the Budokai games growing up. Anyway, so that's my response to that whole thing. Budokai Tenkaichi 3 did have a giant roster, and all the characters did seem unique from each other. Of course, some of them, like you have one character do Kamehameha and another character might do Kamehameha, or a different form of a character might have a Kamehameha as well. But for the most part, each person had their own move list. It wasn't like how you see now. If they do have a giant roster, and it ends up being like Xenoverse 2 where it's a giant roster just for them all to basically do the same thing and there's no unique dynamics or unique special moves or something like that, then I am gonna be upset. So I would agree with you on that. The next thing I'm saying is that they shouldn't have so much focus on the roster because it will take away from something like the story or making stages or basically any other work for the game. But I would say, well, no, not really. They did it with the other games, they can do it again. And that leads to the next argument I hear people saying, the other games built upon each other. And so therefore, this game is building upon itself and of course can't have as many characters as the other game did. And to that I say, perhaps that is true. But does that mean we have to have a low amount of characters? No, it doesn't. Do we have to have the same amount of characters as Budokai Tenkaichi 3? No, we don't. That game is so good that it gave us all the characters we wanted and more. Characters that we couldn't even think of. The reason why we have all these unnecessary, unique characters that don't even make any sense to put on this roster, and they're on the roster, is because they gave us everything we already wanted, and then they gave us more. They had more stuff to do. So that's what we want with this game. Just give us everybody that we actually want, and then, you know what, we don't need those bonus characters, but we would like them, and that would show that it's true to the series. However, just saying that they're building this game on nothing, tell me, how do you actually know that? How do you know that? They have access to basically all these Dragon Ball games from this same developer, and you're gonna tell me they have nothing, absolutely nothing to use? Even if that was the case, they can still have a large roster of characters. And I would agree, DLC could mess up this game, but I have nothing against DLC. I want DLC to add more to this game. I don't want it to take away from what we should already have in this game. Does that make sense, guys? And honestly, my last final opinion on this, the big roster has to happen. This game has to have a big, solid roster. If it doesn't have that, the Budokai Tenkaichi name is rather useless to have. If it has less characters than the first Budokai Tenkaichi, then why are we even calling this game Budokai Tenkaichi? Why are we calling this Budokai Tenkaichi for? Call it something else. At this point, they're just clickbaiting us. If that's even what we want to call it. What is it, like buying bait, game bait? I don't know. Make up a new baiting title for that. They're just baiting us into buying a game because they know everybody wants Budokai Tenkaichi 4, and they're like, just create a Dragon Ball game and call it Budokai Tenkaichi 4. But that's not what we want. So, yes, the big roster, it's got to stay. Let me know how much I'm wrong in the comments, boys and girls. I love you. My name's Konjic, and I'll talk to you in the next video.
And I can say that I'm great, yeah, I can say that I'm perfect. I ain't the one that was out here saving lives, I was purchased. Now we about to take you out if you try to act toxic. I'ma send you straight up to my main man, Konjic.